Hey friends, it's harvest time in the garden and we've got a lot that we're dealing with. We've got a bushel basket full of tomatoes, so we're going to process them. Stick around, we'll show you how. So we've started dealing with our tomatoes here. We had the kitchen table just absolutely full. I'm coring them and then I'm cutting the bottoms off. We're saving all the other parts for the chickens, and then we start blanching these things and get them ready for process. Got our blanching station ready here. We've got some boiling water, we got some cold water. We're going to throw some ice in, and then we have a bucket that we're going to use here with the spigot on the bottom. We're going to try something that we saw online that we think is going to work pretty good for these tomatoes, because these aren't the paste tomatoes, these are more of the slicer tomatoes. So we'll get into that in a little bit. We're going to start blanching tomatoes. Okay, we are ready to roll. You got to be careful putting your tomatoes in here. You don't want to plop them from too high. We're going to go with about 4 or 5 of our tomatoes here. We don't want to cool the water down too much. Maybe we'll do 6. Oh, we've got 6 in there already. Now it's only going to take probably a minute or so. You'll see the skin start to slip off, and then we just go right into the cold water. Okay, we've got our first batch into the ice water. What we do here is we peel them. We save the peels because Kelly freeze dries that, mix tomato powder with those. And then I just crush them in my hands, put them in the bucket. That's the whole process, and we just kind of work our way through. All right, our blanching is done. Kelly will take care of all those skins. We've got all of our crushed tomatoes here in the bucket. So what's supposed to happen is all those tomatoes will float up and all the clear liquid will be on the bottom. And then we can drain off the clear liquid with the spigot, and that's a lot less cooking time we need to do to cook all of that clear liquid out before we can them. So we're going to see if this works. On the internet they use like a gallon like sun tea jar with the spout on it. This is a lot bigger scale. If it doesn't work, we'll just dump it in the pot and cook it as normal. Alright folks, we are back. It's the next morning. Let's check out our tomatoes. We can move forward with these now. So you can see our tomatoes in our bucket. You see all this clear liquid down here that is on the bottom. All the tomatoes have risen to the top. This is normally all the stuff we would have to cook off before we can these tomatoes. So now we can use our drain here. We tilted the bucket last night, so the drain was a little bit lower, and we can drain off all of this liquid. You can see we've almost got a gallon of liquid out of this container, and there's still more to go. So that's over half a gallon more. So we've got about 5 quarts of liquid we were able to take out of our tomato mixture here that we do not have to cook out, and it's going to go a lot quicker now. Now I know what some of you are probably thinking right now. It's not actually quicker because you waited all night long to do this. Well, in that sense you are correct, but we haven't had the cooker running all night. We haven't been heating up the house unnecessarily, and I haven't had to watch it. It's just done this on its own. So to me, that saves my time. So now we need to weigh these tomatoes. So we have our recipe that we're going to follow. We're going to actually do stewed tomatoes. So there's some other items that we need to add, and the recipe is based on weight. So once we weigh the tomatoes, we'll know how much of the other items to put in. So we weighed all of our tomatoes. Make sure you get a tare weight on your bowl, so you're not weighing your bowl. You do that by putting your bowl on there before you turn it on, or you put your bowl on and hit 0, and that'll tare weight your bowl, so you only get the weight of the tomatoes. We have 15 pounds of tomatoes. Look at these beautiful, gorgeous tomatoes that we have left here. So our recipe is based on 3 pounds, so being 15 pounds, we need to do 5 times our recipe. Our recipe calls for 1 onion for every 3 pounds of tomatoes, so we've got 5 of our garden fresh onions here. We're going to get those peeled and chopped. Got my onions chopped. I'm cooking them in a separate pan because I want to cook down all of our veg before we put it into the tomatoes, because we basically just want to heat this mixture up now. So I've got our 5 onions. Each recipe calls for 2 tablespoons of olive oil, so times 5, that's about 2/3 of a cup of olive oil. We also need 5 cups of our bell pepper, which we got from the freezer. This is last year's bell peppers, and Kelly conveniently marks these. That's 4 cups here, and then that's 1 cup here. This is from this year. So we have our 5 cups right there, so that's fantastic that she measures those out. So we'll get all this together and get that cooking down in the skillet. Okay, we're going to start adding our herbs to our tomatoes. So the recipe calls for 1/2 teaspoon of dry oregano. So times 5, that's 2.5 teaspoons, which is just short of a tablespoon, which is what we got here. So we'll go with that into the tomatoes. We haven't even started the heat on those yet. Next is supposed to be 1/4 teaspoon of dried rosemary, which comes up to 1.25 teaspoons, which is about what we have there. Now the recipe doesn't call for basil, but I'm doing it anyway because I love basil with tomatoes. So we're going to go ahead with a full tablespoon of basil. And all of this is fresh, dried or freeze-dried out of our garden. Calls for 1 teaspoon of kosher salt, so times 5. That's going to be about 1 2/3 tablespoon of kosher salt. Next would normally be 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper, but times 5, that's going to be 2.5 teaspoons, which is just short of a tablespoon. Remember, this recipe is based on 3 pounds of tomatoes, and we have 15 pounds of tomatoes. Last but not least is 1/2 teaspoon of just regular granulated sugar. Again, it comes to 2.5 teaspoons. And that's all of our spice. So we're just waiting for our veggies to cook down a little bit before we add those to the party. And then we're going to add garlic as well. The recipe calls for 4 cloves of minced garlic, so that comes out to 20 cloves. So we have the equivalent of 20 cloves of minced garlic here. We're just using our good garlic that we love. So we'll mix that together at the last minute because we don't want our garlic to burn. We just kind of want to wake it up a little bit. And then we add everything to the pot and get this thing up to temp, and then we can start canning. You'll notice as we cook down our vegetables, there's a lot of liquid that comes out of the vegetables. We've got our burner on high because we want most of that liquid to evaporate before we put it into our tomato pot, because we've already reduced the amount of liquid in the tomatoes. We don't want to add a bunch more liquid back in. Now some of you may also be asking, why are you so concerned about liquid in your tomatoes? Well, it doesn't hurt anything, so don't get me wrong, but when you can tomatoes, and if you don't cook them down enough and evaporate all that liquid off that we drained off, when you can them, the tomatoes will rise in the jar just like they did in this bucket, and you'll get that clear liquid on the bottom of your jar sitting on your canning shelf down in the root cellar, and it's just not very attractive. Doesn't hurt anything, it doesn't hurt the flavor. Whatever you make with them is just going to be more watery, but I like a nice thick tomato product when I can it, and I don't need that weird looking liquid on the bottom, because some people will look at that and be off put, saying, "Ooh, I'm not eating those." So that's just what we're trying to avoid. Now when we get our tomatoes on the fire, these stainless steel stock pots don't have a real heavy bottom on them, so I don't want that direct flame right on my tomatoes. So I've got our heat diffuser in here. All this is remember when we made our cider press, we had that aluminum pot that we cut to make the bands because I hadn't used it anymore. So this is a real thick, heavy aluminum. We save the bottom of it for this purpose to help diffuse that direct propane flame on the bottom of our pot, so it creates a more even heat and we're less likely to scorch our contents inside the pot. But you can use cast iron, you can use anything you want. You can even use this center plate if you have one of these on your stove, because the burner's underneath that plate and that would diffuse the heat as well. Alright, we've got enough of our moisture cooked out of our vegetables here. So we're going to go ahead and add our garlic. We'll wake that garlic up a little bit, and then into the big pot we will go. Our vegetables are in, our tomatoes. Throw that garlic in there. It just lit up the kitchen. It was fantastic. It smelled so good. So we're going to get this stirred up. We've got it on about medium heat because we want to bring it up slow. Even with a heat diffuser, you can still have a chance of scorching your material in here in the pot. But doesn't that look amazing already? And while we're waiting to bring that up and get it in the jars, let's talk a little bit about the herbs. You can absolutely use fresh herbs in this recipe. However, you need to remember, if you're using fresh, it takes 2/3 more of a fresh herb than it does a dry herb. So if the recipe calls for, say, a teaspoon of a dry herb, you would need to use 3 teaspoons of fresh, or a tablespoon, which is 3 teaspoons. You want to increase that by 2/3. And also, if the recipe calls for fresh herbs, like 3 teaspoons, you would only use 1 teaspoon of the dry herb. Now let's talk about canning this mixture here. Normally with plain tomatoes you can get away with water bath canning because there's enough acidity in the tomato to get away with that, unless you have a really sweet variety of tomato where you would want to add a little citric acid or some type of lemon juice or whatever, vinegar, to the bottle when you can it. So we added a bunch of extra material in here with the onions and the peppers and all that, so we're lowering the acidity of this mix. So there are recipes that call for water bath canning of stewed tomatoes, but to err on the safe side, and we have our Presto digital canners, we're going to pressure can our tomatoes just to be safe. Now, if you're following a water bath canning recipe, which they're out there on the internet for stewed tomatoes, definitely add the acid to the jar, because you want to make sure you've got enough acid to be safe. So if you're going to go that route, don't leave the acid out. We've got our Presto digital canners out, and you'll see that there's a line in there to fill your water to. Now, we've shown you working these in the past, and I've done a lot of cold pack items where we were able to skip a lot of steps because the jars are already filled. Those initial steps we can just kind of skip through, but because we're doing hot pack today, we cannot skip any steps. So we're going to run through it by the numbers. We've got our water in here already. You can see in our other one, I've started putting jars in. These canners will do 5 quarts. So you put enough water, after you put the water in the pot, you put enough water in your jar to keep it from floating. And these pots will sterilize your jars and everything going through the steps. So we need to do 5 more jars in the other one. I think 10 quarts will be just about what we need for our pot, maybe a little less. If we have some left over, which I doubt we will, we can just make some tomato soup with it or something like that. So let me get 5 more of these jars set up and we'll get the process started. We've got both of our canners filled with our jars. Now you see I'm using narrow mouth quarts for this recipe. Now anything that comes out of a jar easily, I use all my narrow mouth quarts for. Any larger items like maybe peach halves or pickles or something like that that doesn't come out of a jar as easily, that's what I reserve my wide mouth quarts for. So let's get the lids on these canners and I'll show you how to get the process going. So the first thing you want to do is check the seal on your canner. Make sure your seal is sitting in the correct position, which this one is. And then we can go ahead and put the lid on the canner. You see it's got the install remove mark here. You just line it up with this area here and then turn it to lock. We put that down and we lock that. You can see it's already flashing on pressure can. So we just push the button. We set the minutes, usually 20 minutes for quarts, but because we are above sea level between 1,000 and 3,000 feet, we're going to do 25 minutes. Then you just press it again. It says insert jars, which we've already done. So we can go ahead and click that again. It goes into the warming cycle and it's going to sterilize your jars now right in that pot. Now if you're following the instructions for this canner to the letter, it says to remove this regulator from the lid before you start canning. And that's to keep you from leaving it in the locked closed position and the canner won't vent. But I've been around canning long enough, I know we need to vent that steam off. If you don't vent the steam off, you're not going to reach the correct pressure that you need or the correct temperature. So you always got to make sure you vent your canner. So just put this on vent and you'll be good to go. Alright, our first canner has beeped and it says fill jars. So now is the time you can fill jars. However, we're not up to a full simmer that I want to be yet before we put this stuff into jars. So this canner will stay in this mode until we do anything different. So we can just let this set. It's ready to go. The jars are ready to go. When we get ready to can, we'll open the lid, pull the jars out one by one, dump the water out, fill our jars with our material, put the jars back in, and so on until we get it full again before we move on to the next step. Okay, we've been simmering for about 10 minutes, so that's sufficient amount of time. Got no scorching on the bottom of the pot. So we're going to start filling jars. Kelly's going to jump in here with me too, and we'll get this knocked out. You can see the jars are steaming in here. They're all sterilized, so we can get going. Okay, we've about got that canner full. This is working really well with 2 people. So Kelly's got this other canner open. She's been bringing me jars and sealing them as I fill them. So this one's full. We can get it going. You can see we're still on fill jars here. We'll put that down, press the button, and it goes into heating mode and it'll let us know when it's ready to go into canning mode. Alright, we got exactly 9 quarts, which would mean this canner here is short 1 quart. What we did is we just leave that jar of water in there to keep the correct spacing. And then Kelly's already got this one sealed up into the heat mode. Now we have a little hard water here at our place, so we put about 1/2 cup of vinegar into the canner to keep that white hard water stains from getting on the jars. If you forget to do that, that's fine. That stuff just washes right off when you wash your jars. We had about 1/2 cup left over in the bowl. I just ate it with a spoon. It was really good. Our heat diffuser worked fantastic. You can see the bottom of the pot did not scorch at all. Now that we've got everything in the canner, Kelly is making some more of her freeze-dried treats. What you got going on here, babe?
This is raspberry and blueberry cheesecake bites.
Ooh. So, are you going to pre-freeze these before they go in the freeze dryer?
Yeah.
So she puts these in molds so they're a really cool shape. And then she freezes them and puts them in the freeze dryer. And you got little cheesecake bites. They're phenomenal. If you want to see more of what Kelly does, check out the Markelly Farm Facebook page. You will find all things Kelly there. She'll answer any freeze drying questions you got, and you can see a lot more in depth of what we do here on the farm. She posts lots of her pictures on there. Pretty cool site. Now this canner here has gone into the vent stage. It does that on its own, and it'll count down 10 minutes. And after the 10 minutes is done, we will close this vent, press the button, it'll go into canning mode, and it'll build pressure. This little thing here will pop up, which does not allow the lid to open. Canners are a lot more safer nowadays than they used to be. Kelly's also going to put in the freeze dryer some chocolate chip banana bread. That'll be so yummy. They're crunchy little goodness when they come out of there. These pots clean up so much nicer when they're not scorched on the bottom. They clean really quickly. Now, not everybody's going to have access to material like this that I did. You can use a giant cast iron skillet. You can use a cast iron plancha, whatever you want to use for this. If you can't find anything like that, just go to your local welding shop, have them cut you a circle of whatever size you need to cover your burner, say a 1/4 to 1/2 inch plate, whatever you want, and then you can use it that way. Now, you can get stainless steel pots with the heavy bottom on them, but you're going to pay about $300 for those or more, depending on the size of the pot. These pots are super cheap. You can even get these at a dollar store fairly cheaply, and they're stainless steel. You don't want to cook anything acidic in aluminum, like the big aluminum pots. But definitely recommend those heat diffusers. Okay, the vent cycle is over. I don't know if you can see it, but it says put regulator on. We just have to close that is all we do. And then we press the button here, and it goes into canning mode. And once this reaches pressure, our 25 minutes will start counting down, but not before then. Like I said before, now that this is closed, it'll build pressure and this will pop up and completely close off the canner, so it'll be under pressure. Alright, within about 1.5 minutes, our little popper there popped up. So now the best thing about these cookers now is you can walk away. This thing does it all on its own. Especially if you're doing like a 90-minute cook on something, like if you're cooking meat or something like that. It's a real headache to sit here on the stove and keep throttling your burner up and down to maintain that pressure. You got to watch the gauge. This one does it all on its own. You can just walk away. It'll beep when it's done. Pretty crazy. I can go do other stuff now. I'm not handcuffed to this stove. I wish I've had a dollar for every one of these I've sold to our subscribers on recommendation, and they just absolutely love them. It's a game changer for pressure canning. There's still those people out there that say, oh, that's not safe, but these are designed for canning, folks. They work just fine. In fact, I use my other pressure cooker, like my Instapot type thing, to pressure can little pint jars, and have never ever had a problem. And that's just me. I'm not recommending you do that, but it's worked for me and I've never had an issue. Alright, our next canner's ready, beeping. So, good to go. Alright, we'll come back and show you when we're pulling the jars out of these canners. We don't have to do anything else. When this thing's done with its 25 minutes of canning, it'll go into cool down mode. We don't have to do anything. It'll cool down all its own and relieve its own pressure and all that. You'll see people with old-time canners, they'll put them in the sink. They'll run water over them to cool them down. I don't recommend doing that, because if your canner cools down too quick when it's under pressure, you'll lose some of your liquid out of your jars sometimes, because you're creating an unequal pressure situation where there's more pressure in the jar than there is in the canner, and that's why you'll lose some of your liquid out of your jars. You don't want to do that. Let it cool down all on its own. When it says done, finished, open the canner or whatever, it'll say that, and we can open her up. Both canners are in cool down mode. Just got through making a couple tortilla pizzas for lunch. This canner is just finished. You can see this little thing has popped down, so we can open this baby up. We're going to let this cool for a little bit. You can see the jars are still boiling. And then once they stop bubbling like that, we'll pull them out, put them on the counter. Now this one's done as well. You can open it up. Wait for it to cool a little bit. Alright, pulled our jars out. They're still bubbling just a little bit, but they'll cool off out here. I put them together so they kind of keep each other warm. We'll let these sit on the counter for about 24 hours. You can see a little bit of that olive oil on top. It's going to be yummy stuff. You can see the peppers and the onions in there. Now do yourself a favor, if you do buy one of these canners at some point, keep the box that it comes in, because it's really handy for storage. We keep these out in the garage, and it keeps the dust off of everything, and it's a good way to store it. Kelly's got all our labels made, ready to go. We can get these down in the root cellar tomorrow after they've sat for a while. We'll take the lids off, or the rings anyway, and wash the jars up, wash the rings, and get everything put away. I was glad to get these tomatoes done. They've been waiting on me for a couple of days. Kelly picked them a couple of days ago. So if you liked this video and you like the content here on our channel, we ask that you share, subscribe, and like and comment and all that good stuff. I know we don't harp on that on our channel, and I take pride in not doing that, but it does help the algorithm. If YouTube sees that people like the stuff, it'll go out further to more people, and we want to help more people learn how to be self-sufficient and learn how to do things the old way. So do that for us. It would be greatly appreciated. So until next time, stay safe, stay healthy. We love you guys. Come back and see us here on the farm.